¿Qué pasó?
Good day. Growing up in Australia, I learnt little about Latin America. However, having lived in the United States for over 3 decades, I've taken many opportunities to explore your wonderful region, from Tijuana in the north to Cape Horn in the south, and 8 countries in between. I've visited Lake Titicaca, enjoyed eco-tours in Nicaragua and Brazil, travelled by bus across Patagonia, marvelled at Machu Picchu, and I've enjoyed wonderful hospitality in every part of Latin America I have visited. Consequently, I was delighted to be invited to give a keynote address at this conference. Over my academic career, I've struggled with trying to solve a wicked jigsaw. I want to discover how the pieces of the world fit together. This is a wicked jigsaw because the pieces do not slot together neatly. There is no picture to check your progress, and you have no idea how many pieces there are in the puzzle. However, in the last few years, I think I have finally reached the stage where I have 3 large, recognisable sections of the puzzle. And this is what I want to present today. I will talk about 3 information systems sections of this puzzle: capital, systems, and objects. I have an Australian friend who is a mentor to senior level executives, and he argues that the CEO is responsible for changing the game. My question is, how do they change the game if they don't know what game they're playing, how to play the game, and what the modern form of the game is? In this talk, I'm going to argue that the game is capital creation, that systems are used to create capital, and that the modern form of the game is based upon objects. My talk is based upon a book I published last year on Amazon.com. And so if you want to learn more about the notions of capital, systems and objects, consider getting a copy of the book. The first theme that I will talk about is capital. The world is a massive capital creation system that has evolved over more than 10,000 years since the birth of agriculture in the Middle East. All organisations, business enterprises, universities, governments, religions, and service organisations such as Rotary are all examples of capital creation systems. Capital creation is the unifying theme for studying all forms of organisation. The world consists of 2 complex adaptive systems. On the left side, we have the natural system that has been operating for billions of years. This is aimed at capturing energy, initially from the sun, storing in the form of sugars in plants. Animals eat these plants, and animals eat each other. The whole natural system is about capturing energy and storing it so you can survive for another day and reproduce. The natural system produces food for humans and animals to eat. On the right side, we have the human system. This has been developed over about the last 10,000 years since humans started settlements and agriculture, and it focuses on capital creation. We'll see later that there are 6 types of capital. This system provides goods and services that we consume. Each of the systems has 2 critical measures. For natural systems, we're interested in greenhouse gas emissions and the size of the human population. For human systems, the key measures are E prime, measure of energy efficiency, and C prime, a measure of capital productivity. You'll see that because of the law of conservation of energy, E prime is always less than or equal to 1. On the other hand, C prime is typically greater than 1 because companies that are not productive in the use of their capital soon go out of business. The greenhouse effect is critical for life on Earth. If there were no CO2 in the atmosphere, the average temperature would be minus 18 degrees C. There would be very little life on Earth. In pre-industrial periods, the level of CO2 was around about 280 parts per million, which resulted in an average temperature of about 15 degrees C. Since the advent of industrialisation about 150 or more years ago, the level of CO2 has risen. It now exceeds 400 parts per million, and on current trends will be towards 800 parts per million by 2100, which would indicate a temperature greater than 19 degrees Celsius, which would have a major impact and a very disruptive impact upon life on Earth. We are dependent upon CO2 in the environment to slow down outgoing infrared radiation and to essentially provide a blanket for life on Earth. However, too much CO2 in the atmosphere increases the size of the blanket and things get too hot. The Earth is on track to have a population of about 9 billion people by 2040. This is well above the capacity of the Earth to support everybody in a European standard of living. Indeed, to provide that level of living standard, the population would need to be around about 2 billion people. Every year we overshoot the capacity of the Earth to provide for humanity. This year it will be around about August 22nd. Humans have a long history of raising E' to improve our standard of living. It started with cooking food probably millions of years ago. When food is cooked, it breaks down the nutrients and makes them easier to digest, and it's reckoned that cooked food releases about 100% more of the calories in the uncooked food. This enabled humans to spend less time hunting and gathering. Another important development was the potato. Imported from South America, potatoes provide more nutrients per acre than any other staple, and it's considered that the introduction of potatoes to Europe resulted in an extended period of warfare, and on a more positive front, enabled a number of farm workers to move from rural areas to the city and provided the necessary workforce for the Industrial Revolution. Another important development was Watt's steam engine. Watt did not invent the steam engine, but made it more efficient so that it could be used to drive the Industrial Revolution. More recently, we've seen electrification, the widespread distribution of electricity to many homes around the world, and now we're in a transition period when we're introducing renewable energy sources in the form of wind and solar, which reduce the cost of electricity and reduce carbon emissions. As with E', we see improvements in C' over time. Some of the more recent ones are the introduction of a factory for mass production of goods. The assembly line, introduced by Henry Ford to manufacture cars, considerably lowered the cost of cars and enabled many people to be able to purchase them. The most important development in recent times has been the digital computer, which has greatly improved the productivity of many organisations, as we've seen with the internet, which enabled households to access information and participate in online shopping. And an important forthcoming development in raising C' is the Internet of Things, where we connect billions of objects together and enable us to get data about their status and change their status remotely. C' is responsible for the standard of living that we have today. Economists define capital as a durable and transforming factor of production generated by a prior investment. So in the photograph you can see Henry Ford's Rouge River plant, a massive investment in capital designed to manufacture cars and employed something like 100,000 people. It was the largest factory of its time. Albert Einstein famously noted that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. And we can see the wonder of compound interest by considering that if you had an ancestor who invested $1 1,320 years ago at 2% per annum, you would now have $250 trillion, which is the estimated gross value of all capital on Earth. Our standard of living today is dependent upon our ancestors compounding capital for thousands of years to create the investments that we have today that enable us to live a very good life. In this table, I show the 6 types of capital and the 3 major areas in which we need to consider the application of capital. In the national setting, organisations, which is the prime mechanism for creating capital, and individuals. We also have capital, we create capital and we use capital for the success of our careers. I'll focus on the organisational aspect of capital in this talk. So briefly, economic capital is financial, physical and manufactured resources, the things that a company makes. Human capital is your skills, knowledge and the abilities of a workforce. For an organisation, natural capital is the right to use or extract natural resources such as farming and mining. Organisational capital is institutionalised knowledge and codified experiences, basically it's software, databases, processes and routines. Social capital is the ability of the organisation to benefit from its social connections. It's its network of relationships. And finally, symbolic capital is an organisation's reputation, image, brand and ranking within an industry. Every organisation is a capital creation system. It imports capital. It has some internal processes, which later you'll find are systems, to convert capital from one form to another, or to enhance a form of capital, and there's a capital outflow. So if you think of a university, the capital inflows are economic, such as the fees that students pay, human capital, the students themselves, and faculty, also another form of human capital. We have an internal process called education, which converts human capital to higher levels of human capital. We also do research and a whole variety of other things to create a capital outflow that consists of graduates, human capital, maybe patents and inventions. And this is the nature of every human created capital production system. It converts capital from one form to another, and this is the foundation of our present civilization. Capital creation systems are not static. There's competition between the various players in an industry, and capital creation evolves. There are innovations, changes in the way in which capital are combined, and the evolution of the automotive industry illustrates this very clearly. We'll start with Henry Ford and the Ford Motor Company, which is famous for introducing the assembly line and the T-model Ford. Ford didn't offer his customers very much. He said you can have a car painted any colour as long as it's black. The mass production of a single model in one colour was not a major human capital challenge. Henry Ford thought of the workers on the assembly line as replaceable. If someone left, he could easily find another person to take their place, and they required minimal training. Similarly, he needed minimal organisational capital to run a business with a single model in one colour. Ford's main goal was to invest in economic capital in terms of the River Rouge complex to produce economic capital, cars that he could sell. He had 60% market share in the early days of his business. When Alfred P. Sloan took over General Motors, he introduced a range of cars, and this challenged Ford's single model capital creation system. Rather than a single car in one colour, Sloan offered the market a car for every purse and every purpose. He introduced the notion of a multi-divisional corporation and annual strategic planning to decide which model each particular aspect of the organisation would manufacture. He understood that organisational capital in the form of a management team and strategic planning was central to the success of the car industry. He noted, take my assets, but leave me my organisation, his organisational capital, and in 5 years I'll have it all back. This was a more successful capital creation model than that introduced by Ford, and in a short period GM went from 12% market share shortly before Sloan took over to become the market leader. Ford has never recaptured market leadership from GM. Each of the systems has two critical measures. For natural systems, we're interested in greenhouse gas emissions and the size of the human population. For human systems, the key measures are E prime, measure of energy efficiency, and C prime, a measure of capital productivity. You'll see that because of the law of conservation of energy, E prime is always less than or equal to 1. On the other hand, C prime is typically greater than 1 because companies that are not productive in the use of their capital soon go out of business. Toyota shifted attention to human capital. He noted that workers are the treasure of the factory. They are important to me. By training workers, by giving them lifetime employment, Japanese companies such as Toyota and Honda maximise the utilisation of their human resources, resulting in higher quality cars and higher levels of productivity, lower turnover and less absenteeism. They invested in the continuous development of employees' skills. When Toyota entered the US market, American cars were famous for lasting only 2 or 3 years. The quality of Japanese cars was far superior, they lasted a lot longer, they were cheaper, and they inflicted lasting damage on the automotive industry in the United States. Chris Bangle at BMW was influential in changing the industry in another direction by putting the focus on symbolic capital. For Bangle, cars are not some utilitarian product. Rather, he notes, we at BMW do not build cars as consumer objects just to drive from A to B. We build mobile works of art. BMW became expert at creating symbolic capital, developing the ultimate driving machine, so that the luxury segment of the automotive industry produces about 12% of the vehicles and 50% of the profits. Symbolic capital can make a tremendous difference to the profitability and capital productivity of a business. Elon Musk is the most recent major change agent in the automotive industry with his introduction of the electric vehicle. Musk is a disruptive force. He understands that disruptive technology can have a major technology discontinuity, and typically these disruptions come from new companies. Musk's focus is on organisational capital. He produces the connected car that can stream data to Tesla and whose software can be updated remotely. The disruptive power of Tesla is illustrated by the following headline. Tesla is outselling every major German rival, such as Mercedes, BMW and Audi, in the US and European markets. We can think of an industry as operating around a mountain, and each of the competitors trying to climb the slopes of that mountain to reach the highest level of productivity. But every now and again, someone comes along, like Tesla, and finds a new mountain with a higher level of capital productivity, and it starts towards the bottom slope and gradually works its way up. Very quickly, it's competitive with the incumbents. And if we look at Tesla's reformulation of the automotive industry, we can see that it's founded on three elements. First of all, the number of moving parts in a car is significantly different. The old internal combustion engine has about 2,000 moving parts, whereas an electric vehicle has about 20 moving parts. Much cheaper to manufacture, much cheaper to maintain and repair. If you have a recall in the traditional model, such as there's a brake problem, then you have to send a notice to every owner of the car. They have to visit their local dealership, which could be an inconvenience, wait an hour or so for a repair, and this could be a costly repair because it involves human capital. Whereas with Tesla, it might be as simple as a software patch to fix the problem. For example, a couple of years ago, Consumer Reports, a magazine in the United States that evaluates products and services, reported that the Tesla had a brake problem and it was not as efficient as a BMW. Elon Musk responded, well, that's just a software patch. We can fix that within 2 weeks. And sure enough, he had. Consider the cost difference between having to bring cars into a dealership compared with distributing a software fix. It's a much better capital productivity model when you embed software in cars, you build your business around the organisational capital of software. And the final element of difference is the dealership. The traditional car industry operates on large dealership locations where there may be hundreds of cars on display waiting for a buyer to turn up. In contrast, Tesla has a showroom with 2 or 3 cars, possibly in an upmarket mall where there is considerable flow of people past the dealership. Again, this is a difference in organisational capital. One invests in a massive dealership with the capital tied up in cars, and the second, Tesla, invests in a showroom with a couple of cars in it. Elon Musk and Tesla have reformulated the automotive industry to operate on a higher mountain with a higher level of capital productivity. I'll finish this review of the automotive industry and the changing nature of capital creation with a quote from Elon Musk. If you're trying to create a company, it's like baking a cake. You have to have all of the ingredients in the right proportion. Capital creation is about finding the recipe, the way of combining and transforming capital to create more capital. And with innovation, the capital creation system continually changes, and then every now and again someone comes along to reformulate that recipe and raise the capital productivity of the industry. The winners are those with the highest level of capital productivity. The second theme is systems. About 3 summers ago, I spent a summer reading and thinking about systems. As a result, I identified 5 fundamental systems. I don't have the time today to explain the origin of these systems, or my rationale for settling on 5. Systems are the way you create capital. The transformation between one form of capital and another is undertaken by a system. and I'm going to introduce to you 5 fundamental systems. Humans have developed 5 types of systems over millions of years, and all of these systems were in place around about 2,000 years ago. We started off with systems of engagement, which enable people to collaborate and coordinate their activities to improve hunting and gathering initially, and now the performance of an organisation. The second type of system is framing, which is a way of justifying the reason for behaving in a particular way or promoting a particular opinion. You'll sometimes see this in the form of a company's mission statement or its underlying vision, so that for Walmart it talks about everyday low prices, which is its framing of the purpose of the organisation. Systems of inquiry generate knowledge. Today we think of these in the form of data analytics and machine learning. A system of production creates and transports products and services. These are the main engines of a capital creation society. And then finally we have systems of record. These record and retrieve data. These are databases, data lakes, whatever sort of data system you like to call them. These 5 systems are the foundation of the conversion of capital from one form to another. Overall, we have 6 types of capital, 5 types of systems, and the glue that holds all of this together is organisational capital. Software, procedures, databases, and processes that human capital develops in order to make an organisation a productive and ongoing enterprise. A few examples will illustrate how the combination of systems and capital creation work. I'm going to start with an example from natural capital. And the company is Goldcorp, and in about 2000, Goldcorp, a Canadian miner, made public about 400 megabytes of geological data. It had collected data using geological surveys and other methods of some of its sites, but it had problems in analysing this data to discover where the gold was. So it offered a prize of around about $575,000 to a company or individual who could provide a method to estimate where the gold was. So it had a lot of data, but it literally didn't know the value of that data in terms of where the gold lodes were. As a result of the competition, 110 targets were identified by a company in Western Australia, quite close to where I used to live. This resulted in $6 billion worth of gold being mined by 2009, and the market value of the company went from 100 million to 9 billion. We can understand this in terms of a series of systems. First of all, there was a production system to capture information about the gold deposits and geological features of those deposits. This was put into a record, roughly these 400 bytes of geological data. They then used a competition to engage experts in evaluating the data, which resulted in a system of inquiry that was able to visualise where the target mining should occur and resulted in the creation of economic value for Goldcorp. The trend over about the last 50 years has been to convert human capital into organisational capital through digitisation. 2 major pathways for this conversion have been robotics, converting human manual tasks into machine tasks, and the second pathway has been machine learning, taking intellectual tasks and through the use of algorithms converting these into organisational capital that the organisation can then use to support decision making. This capital conversion process is based upon establishing a system of inquiry, such as analysing data for machine learning and turning it into a production system that can be operated over and over again, such as with robots. So the process is to create a system of inquiry that leads to a system of production. The final example I will use today shows how symbolic capital can be created. In this case, we see an example of a smart car monitoring a Twitter feed. And someone commented, saw a bird that had crapped on a smart car, totaled it. In the listening room at Smart USA, someone picked up this tweet and responded in a very smart fashion. Couldn't have been one bird. Sounds more like 4.5 million. Seriously, we did the math. And then there's an infographic accompanying the responding tweet that shows it was 4.5 million pigeons, or 300,000 turkeys, or 45,000 emus. Here we see an example of a system of inquiry, monitoring the tweet feed, framing a humorous response that fits very much with the image of being a smart company that produces smart cars, and then engaging with its customers and followers through tweeting the response. Very effectively, the smart car company has created symbolic capital by its response to a tweet about an incident observed between a pigeon and a car. You've now seen 3 examples of how companies link systems together to create capital. Here is our ideal model of a set of virtuous interactions. You can start at any place in this model to create an ongoing loop of improving capital productivity. But let's start with a system of engagement, which is when you try to generate demand for your product by engaging with potential customers. Along with the demand, you produce engagement data, which goes into your system of record. The demand data goes into the system of production, which produces production data, also loaded into the system of record. You then have a system of inquiry that acts upon the system of record to produce generalised knowledge, which goes into the system of framing, which might be a board of directors or some senior management team, and they decide on product refinements, which go back into the system of production, or they decide on different ways of engaging with customers. These might be new promotion campaigns. The system of framing can also propose a use case back to the system of inquiry. For example, the senior management team might say, what if we do this? This system of inquiry could then feed data back to the system of record, suggesting a measurement refinement. What you want is the whole system to operate seamlessly and interactively to improve a company's products and methods of engaging with its various customers, other stakeholders over time. The very successful Spanish retailer ZARA is a good example of how you can tie together various systems to create a highly successful company. So in this case, they start with their system of framing, and their goal is to rapidly deliver fresh fashion at reasonable prices to young urban women. Its system of production supports this framing by manufacturing small lots using automated cutting machinery, by outsourcing to local assembly, and operating a centralised distribution system. The system of production enables ZARA to respond rapidly to changes in fashion by young urban women. Another part of their virtuous system of interaction is the connection between inquiry and framing. There's frequent digital communication between each of the ZARA stores and the designers so that they continually fine-tune the value proposition for their target segment. The final theme of my talk is objects. I first wrote about object-oriented enterprise design nearly 20 years ago when I was trying to understand Amazon. Today, given the limited time, I will give you a very brief introduction to the concept of objects and their linkage to capital and systems. I will use a simple, familiar example to introduce object-oriented thinking as a tool for designing capital creation systems. Computer scientists recognise that object orientation is the most successful way to develop software. And in computer science, an object is composed of data and processes. I've taken these ideas and applied them to organisations. And for me, an organisation is composed of capital, the equivalent to data, and systems, the equivalent to processes. So, in my sense, we build organisations by putting together objects composed of capital and systems. I'm going to use ride sharing as an example. And here we have to put together 4 objects or 4 organisations in order to create a ride sharing service. The first thing is we need a driver, a person with a car. Then we need a rider, someone who wants to go from point A to B. This transport of the customer or the rider needs to be supported by a mapping service. And then finally, the fourth object is a credit card processor who can handle the payment. The ride-sharing service uses digital data streams, the exchange of standardised data in digital format, to link these four objects together using the services of a mobile phone company. Just as you can build software from existing objects, you can also build an enterprise by combining existing objects in a way that may not have happened before. Many of the internet companies that you are familiar with have been created by identifying how to connect existing objects in a novel way to create a new capital creation system. For example, Facebook found a way to create objects, humans, together using the internet to create a very valuable capital creation system. Entrepreneurs find ways to combine existing objects to deliver current services better or to create new services. Much of the wealth created over recent years has been through the application of object-oriented enterprise design concepts. In today's talk, I've introduced three ideas: capital, systems, and objects. I've done this fairly quickly because it's at least a book-length exposition to introduce these ideas in any depth. Here's a brief summary of the key ideas that I've introduced. Humans have created a capital creation system based upon the production of 6 types of capital for converting capital from one form to another or enhancing a particular type of capital. It's not really critical that you settle on these 6 types of capital, but you should at least identify a small set of capital that are relevant to your organisation so that there is a common vocabulary and understanding to facilitate discussions and improvement of the organisation's capital creation system. Secondly, there are 5 fundamental systems that enable capital creation. And based upon the research that we've done in this area, I think these are quite distinct and firm foundations, and that you might well settle on deciding that there are 5 systems. And finally, I introduced the idea of object orientation as a mindset for capital creation. Think of the world as consisting of objects that, using digital means, can be connected together to create new enterprises. The goal of every organisation is to create capital. Whether it's a university, a religion, a service club, or a profit-oriented business, its purpose is to be a capital creator and ideally more productive than any of its competitors in the industry. Organisations need to use means such as digitisation and object orientation to raise their C-prime or capital productivity. If the themes of capital systems and objects interest you and you would like to get more involved, please contact me about co-authoring a Spanish translation that is also localised with Latin American cases. Earlier this year, I worked with an Indian IS professor and friend to create a Southeast Asian edition of the book by replacing about 25 of the cases with similar Indian stories. I also have a complete set of slides for anyone wishing to teach about capital, systems and objects. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today about capital, systems and objects. Please stay healthy.
¿Y qué pasó? Que yo nunca podría, pues mira que aquí estoy trayendo guapería. Con el Sambo 21 vengo suave y vacilando, y a todo el mundo aquí estoy invitando para que te agarres